Hi, this is Professor Stugard, and today we're going to take another look at how we can use Microsoft Excel to help solve some of our homework questions a little bit easier. Now in this case, the homework question we're going to be looking at is from Chapter 3 and from Section 3.3. And it's going to be our very first question. So our very first question gives us data that represents the high temperature distribution for a summer month in a city for some of the last 130 years. And I want to treat the data as a population. All right. And the first thing it's asking me to do is approximate the mean and standard deviation. Now, again, we're looking at 130 years of data and daily temperatures, which means we have thousands and thousands of data points. Again, the days right there. We have 200, 300, 1400, 1400, 250. This is a lot of data. So I want to find the mean. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is open up this table in Microsoft Excel. As always, make sure you enable the editing. And let's make this a little bit bigger so we can see. All right. So again, if I want to find the average temperature, well, that means I need to add up the temperatures from every single day and then divide by the number of days. So let's start off with figuring out what the number of days would be. Well, I need to add up everything in this column. Well, luckily Excel can do this for us. Equals sum, which means add it all up, add our parentheses, highlight our data, enter, and we have 3,480 days that we have our data for, which means that's going to be what we need to divide by if we want to calculate our mean. Now, the thing is, this is not the raw data. This data has already been cleaned up a little bit. This data has already been organized into our different classes. We have a class or a bin of 50 to 59, a class of 60 to 69, a class of 70 to 79, a class of 80 to 89, a class of 90 to 99, and a class of 100 to 109. So, again, this data has already been organized for us just a little bit. So, even though we don't have the exact raw data, we're still going to be able to make some pretty good conclusions about this data. And the way we have to do this is start off by first figuring out what is going to be our class midpoint for each of these different classes. Now again, remember that the class midpoint is halfway between the lower limit between two consecutive classes. And again, this one's not too bad. What's halfway between 50 and 50? Or no, what's halfway between 50 and 60? 55. Halfway between 60 and 70 would be 65, and then 75, 80, 85, 95, and 105. These are our class midpoints. So again, we're saying that that's probably the average of the temperatures in that particular class. So now, what we need to do for this next step is to figure out, well, let's see, I have 2 days where it seems like the average temperature was 55. Well, remember, I need to add up all of my data, so I need to do 55 plus 55. That's okay for this first one, but for the next one, I have 301 days that had an average temperature of 65, which means I need to add up 65 plus 65 plus 65, well, 301 times. But of course, that's not really what we want to do. We want to make this easier because we want to do this using multiplication, right? Any repeated addition is actually equal to multiplication. Now, the nice part about Excel, again, is that, well, we can either calculate these one at a time or create a formula that Excel can kind of fill in for us for the rest of our data. So again, if I want to create a formula, we hit the equal sign, and, well, it's multiplication. So 2, right? And again, we're clicking that particular Excel cell times the midpoint, press enter, and of course that's 110. Now if we go back to that cell, and in the bottom right hand corner, we see where the cursor changes from kind of a big plus to a little plus. If we grab that and pull it all the way down. It's going to do all of that multiplication for us. So now it's added up the number 301 65 times to get 19,565, and so on down the list. Now, again, we're going to use Microsoft Excel to add up all these values. I mean, you can do it on your calculator, but why not use the technology while it's here? And again, we can use the sum function. So equals sum, parentheses, highlight all of my data. Boom, there we go. And then now over here, now I can figure out what my average temp would be. And, you know, it's an average, so we divide. So again, get Excel to do the math for us. So equals, because we want to do an equation, the total temperatures, and then divided by the number of days, enter, and I get 79.8649 and so on. So there's my average temperature. And let's see, round to 1 decimal place. So let's go back. So if I round to 1 decimal place, that's my first decimal place is an 8, but the one next to it is a 6, so I got to round up. So 79.9. All right, excellent. Now we have to do the standard deviation. All right. Well, all right. So for this one, again, there's a couple ways we can do standard deviation. Remember, there's the conceptual and the computational formulas. But to kind of reiterate what the standard deviation is, and again, to explain where it comes from and the fact that we're using technology in tables, let's actually do it that way. So we're going to take, first of all, to calculate the standard deviation, we need to figure out how far away from the average we typically are. All right. So what that means is the first thing I want to find is going to be the mean minus my midpoint for each of these. All right. So now, again, we can use the data that Microsoft Excel has, and that might be, that should give us the right answer as well. And this would be the most accurate way to do it. My stat lab is also going to accept if you use the rounded answer too, so whichever one you feel more comfortable with. But again, it's going to be an equation, so equals, and then my mean or my average temperature minus the midpoint. And so, all right, there we go, and all the way down for our different data values, which, that's kind of interesting. We can clearly see that it is still, I know what happened. See, Microsoft Excel has an error in the formula. It thought that we were supposed to go through all these blank cells as well. So it looks like I am going to have to do this slightly differently. All right, so hold on. Let's delete all of that. And again, this is really common when using Excel, that you get errors like this. And in fact, this is a kind of a problem with a lot of Excel spreadsheets that we see in the corporate world or even in the public sector, where people are storing data and not necessarily the best way, or are not keeping their Excel sheets very clean. And in fact, I think there was a study done that more than half of all Excel spreadsheets have some sort of computational error in them somewhere. All right, so we're going to do this a little bit differently then. So I'm going to say this equals, I am going to use now the 79.9, which was my mean, minus my class midpoint. Enter. There we go. And now if I drag it down, there we go. So again, that's how far away we typically are from the mean. All right. Now, obviously, again, right, when we do this process, some of these are, well, negative. We don't want negative. So what we need to do is square them. So that they become positive. So again, this is an equation. So equals, I'm going to click the one I want to square. And now to square something in Microsoft Excel, we do this little caret. So that's Shift 6. Shift 6 on your keyboard. And that is our to the, and we're doing that to the second power. So enter, and it squared that. And again, it can square all of my values. And good. Now all of my values are squared. All right. Now we need to find out, again, well, how many times we're doing multiplication again. So now, again, how many times was my deviation from the mean squared equal to 620? Well, it was 620 times, and we got to go back to the frequency, back to the 2 days. All right, back to the number of days. So enter, and then again, drag that all the way down, and let Excel do the calculations for us. And this is another one where we're going to need the sum. We need the sum. So we take the sum. The sum now is that 202,000 or so. And what I want to find now is my variance. All right. So my variance is going to be the average of how many times my square was off. So this big number here divided by, again, my total frequency, which is still that cell there with my total number of days, and enter. So there's my variance. And then the last part, to find my standard deviation. My standard deviation is going to be the square root of that number. All right. And so for Microsoft Excel, the way we're going to find the square root is, again, we make it into an equation. And for square root, the way Microsoft Excel has that function written in is SQRT, to kind of abbreviate. So square root, we click that value there, press enter, and there's my standard deviation, 7.628. All right, let's double check how many decimal places they wanted us to go to. And so back to the homework, 1 decimal place, that's what I figured. So 1 decimal place, 7.6, the next number is a 2. So yes, we're going to keep that as 7.6. So 7.6, and we're done. Nice. All right. The rest of these questions have to do with the shape of the data. They gave us a histogram here. Again, they did our frequency distribution for us. So is this bell-shaped? Well, yeah, that looks pretty symmetric. I feel like I could draw a bell, so I'm going to say yes, that is bell-shaped. Nice work. And then according to the empirical rule, 95% of days in the month will be between what two temperatures? So remember that empirical rule. For 95% of my data, that needs to be within 2 standard deviations of the mean. So let's go back. Again, I have my average temperature here. And so if I'm going to find my 95% data, again, there's going to be my lower bound, and then my 95% of my data for my upper bound. And again, I'm going to let Microsoft Excel really do this for me. So it's a formula. So again, remember, the lower bound equals, we started our mean temperature, we started our average temperature, and we subtract 2 of the standard deviations. So 2 times, and again, make sure you put the times sign. Microsoft Excel really wants you to put that. And my standard deviation. Enter. And then we're going to do the same thing for our upper bound. So again, equals to make it an equation. Average temperature. But now we add 2 standard deviations. So plus 2 times. And again, I can just click my standard deviation value. And there we go. So let's double check. Round to 1 decimal place. Perfect. So the first one's 64.6, and the other one is 95.1. So 64.6, 95.1. Let me double check. Good. Enter. And perfect. We got everything right on this particular question. All right. Now, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Again, I would suggest that you kind of follow along, do your homework with the video, pausing as you need to make sure you get it correct. Don't forget, we also have our wonderful tutors from the Academic Success Center that will help you and go through this problem with you one-on-one if you schedule an appointment. And good luck.